Chili here with Sirius Talis Moon. This is Soul Hour Jupiter Day. And actually, already moon night. Moon is 17 degrees Sagittarius, and the ascendant is approaching that degree. Midheaven is closer to Al Qaid. I'm going to need to call on Al Qaid, the destruction of cities, because I have to talk about addresses and real estate. Um, I was watching an interview with um, Anya, Anya White, a niece of Epstein. Um, and as she was talking about, there was a picture there of Bill Clinton wearing a dress, and um, and she talked about the dress as a proof that he had to submit to. Okay, now this is a very, 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 very challenging topic because um, this topic of the cloning and trafficking in the elite um, is associated with wealth consolidation on real estate and natural resources. And um, yes, there are also they also play not only with the gender but with the genitals forcibly. Uh, and you talked about them effectively castrating her. Okay, they started with giving her testosterone and then taking off her womb instead of stopping to give her the pills that would cause her womb to hurt. They tried to do that to me as well. So um, I particularly remember the connection of address and address. And I also want to um, talk about the fact that, yes, some people, whether it's because they're either biologically intersex or a female and are forced to cross as men, or because they're gay, like, okay, um, that that absolutely can be. And to have an address, okay, to have a house, one needs to do a certain humiliation right to do it address. And since most of them are crossing as men, the dress is showing that they were trafficked. So, in fact, when I was homeless, I was wearing a dress to the realtor, and I didn't think much of it because I was homeless. But that was basically a humiliation, right? That they wanted to show that I was trafficked so that I would have a house. For me, I didn't understand any of that. And there was a link in with address and address, and um, something came to me in a dream with the person that was attempting to traffic me in academia, and he was showing that the address is about basically the humiliation right. So it was approving to me that was the case. Um, and this harms, basically right now we see it in the United States, we see it with ICE. People are losing not only their house but their RVs because they don't go through the humiliation rites of the elite. Okay, and that's something that began to happen in COVID. Um, Now, of course, people that were born into these cults, they would have nobody to understand. This is why I was called to look at the niece of Epstein interview. And mind you, even when it comes to Europe, um, being, how should I say that, diplomatic relations with United States, whether it's Trump or not, entailed a humiliation ritual, and they had to bring whether women or men. Okay, the humiliation ritual had to do with that address, and it began to affect the policies around public housing because people would no longer get public housing without that humiliation ritual. And this is a global issue. So I just began watching the recent interview by Annika Lucas. Um, she was more familiar with the rights of the buried alive of Detru. It's not Detru because Detru was only less, I think, less than 10 years older. Um, so it was not even Detru. It was what Detru was born to, and Detru indeed could not have housing without doing what it did. Okay, Alandra, the interview of Anneke and Lucas and Alandra shows that particular point, and the dress. I don't know if it's perhaps coming from United States, but it does affect Europe. Okay, I did not have housing in Europe, and I did not have housing in Israel. Um, and because I wasn't willing to go through those rights, um, okay, then it's not even about career because I wasn't seeking a career like in the White House or anything like that, um, or even in politics. Yes, I studied degree in politics and went to second degree, but I studied ESP and politics of the senses. I studied basically a thesis that began with political science and I'm sorry, with philosophy of science and the sciences, and I paid attention to the case of psychiatry. And then my instructor was an MD, and it became a thesis about philosophy of medicine applied. So, and the body mind question. So, when Annika told uh, about this man that was studying near death experiences, in because I tended to the body mind, then through the astral, I was subjected to something a bit similar when I saw therapy. So, and that was the thing from either my generation or my control group. Maybe because I think it's not even because they couldn't reach us in the physical, because my mother wouldn't ask for help from the welfare, but because they also wanted to see what can they do through MK often like stuff. And okay, if you talk about Frank Olson's suicide, um, it seems like a murder, and it seems like he was subjected to trauma, particularly with the drugs, and the drugs make one susceptible. Okay, and they try to make people drink alcohol or um, something that would alter their consciousness so they're more susceptible to mind control because they have to provide, and Annika Lucas talked about it, they have to provide some nourishment and care to develop trauma bond. Okay, they have to do the interchange of, and that you know that means that they have less and less to leech on. Okay, and unless a person grow, and the only thing they would have to leech on is the people that stay there beyond childhood and were born or were born to these cults, is that they would have these rites and rituals that would have consecutive filming. Um, so, and that makes it, for example, if there is no man, that if there doesn't exist a man, or is not allowed around my circles to exist a man that can honor me on my non-erotic and erotic, my sexual and non-sexual, when he has a hard on and when he doesn't have a hard on, when he wants me, okay, whether he wants me or whether he's not into me or whether he is into me. It's like when that doesn't exist, How do I know what my sexual orientation is? And I can tell that recovering from those rituals, okay, I used to feel weird and uncomfortable around children, and that no longer happens. And there were attempts to try to go to certain directions where, while healing the child self, I stopped feeling uncomfortable around children. So I never had desire to. I never had desire to have sex with children, um, or erotic desire towards children. It never got to that point, but I could see how but also, to be very, 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 very honest, I was disconnected from my sexuality, and to be connected to my sexuality, I needed to heal my child self. If I didn't know that, that could have been very risky if I would have been an alcohol consumer or a drug consumer, and particularly when I chose um, to go to academia in the beginning. Okay, I had no idea what academia is. It's a human trafficking hub. It's a child trafficking hub. That's where they make the theories that would inspire the policies of how to harm people, and particularly the departments that are dealing with trauma, welfare, child development. Um, okay, I'm very glad I didn't continue in linguistics because I was really into language acquisition. And if I think about Habermas, that he also had Chiron in Mercury sign, then the notion of the speech impairment, El Barak has speech impairment, and and that's to do with the rituals. Okay, that's to do with a sexual boundary violation that affects cognition, expression, and language acquisition. My weird accents probably have to do with that. I think a lot of you saw where my in the beginning it was, if I would think about something, my accent would change, but then it became less and less volitional, and that is absolutely, that is actually evidence. That is actually evidence. um, yes, Uranus going through the last degrees of Taurus. Taurus is the voice. So now, when it comes to real estate, we see more and more how what was once in the elite, with the thinning of the veil, there was, because there was, let's say, social media, okay, and content creators, people began to make money, yes, independently of the corporate ladder, which was rituals of humiliation rites. Okay, climbing up the ladder was humiliation rites, and independently of academia. Okay, um, yes, absolutely. Boundaries, boundaries, but there's pancake. Even in astrology, there was a calling to instill the humiliation rite and child trafficking rings. That's what it means to regulate a field of study. Okay, that's effectively what it means, is to make it under the control of those that don't want people to talk about certain things. This is why I became the first astrologer that I know in the world. And I'm sure that there are more, but they're so isolated that they have channels as small as mine that began to talk about MK often. Okay, well, some of my peers maybe would have been trained by MK often. Um, this is why I'm the only astrologer that I know that talks about Aries and the elite and the cloning project and the trafficking rings. While others talk about LGBTQ and raise a pride flag like it's. Now, some of it is because they don't know, some of it's because they went through the humiliation rites themselves or had to be informants even. Um, so when people began to make money independent of those systems, then there were, okay, the rites and rituals that began to target the content creators, and the thinning of the veil. Now it would be because the recruitment is so impossible, because people already know about these things, already don't trust these things and so on. Then they began to lie that somebody consented where they didn't. And big shout out to Light, because it happened to her. Okay. And I saw when they tortured her, I saw that she would be, it happened to me as well. Suddenly she would be wearing something that looked like it was revealing of the bra, or, and that's a result of their torture and mind control. Okay, and it's not about, yes, a person, whatever person wears is not that issue. Is that identify that because it happened to me, and particularly when I was doing Model UN, but then when I was doing broadcasting. And by the way, it's not the reason I don't show my face. It's simply because of the program, and because it's more comfortable for me, like, not to put on makeup and stuff. And I need to show the chart, which is more important than my face for the type of content that I create. My face is visible. The reason I did not go into clippy picture is because we should not hide our faces in the public sphere, digital or not. Okay, the aftermath of Clippy is the Mama Taliban. That's what people don't get. Okay, um, because and that is very important. It's not that Clippy is bringing Mama Taliban. Is that hiding our faces in social media brings the type of regimes that ask at first to put mask and then to go to the mask. And so, yes, and that is beyond important, but this is also connecting directly to the housing crisis, and also when it comes to those humiliation rights. A lot of what people call LGBTQ is people that had forced gender change, no gender affirming care. Okay, and it doesn't mean that there's two genders. I don't know. But as long as there's no sexual sovereignty in the sense of honoring the sexual boundaries and honoring the non-erotic self, there is no, I don't know, if okay, going dating, let's say, in many countries or region, if I dated, let's say, a woman as a woman, a lot of people would say, oh, then this because they're gay and so on. I don't know if I'm as attracted to women as I'm attracted to men. I don't think dating a woman is coping mechanism because I didn't find a non-raping man in my circles is okay. And the fact that the men need to wear a dress and violate children to get an address, and they need an address to get their rights in the municipality, to get an ID. Okay? That needs to change both among the people now and among the elite. Because when somebody's sexual boundaries are violated, basically everything has been violated at that point. house, food, soil, cleanliness, toxins, air, um, everything. And the play pretend is only to commit more crime. Some people talking about Epstein being above the Mossad. I don't know. Okay, I don't know the family, the lineage. And if I listen to Anya, and I believe her, that Epstein was assaulting 17, 18 years old girls, basically, while her father was doing that to 3 years old. So imagine in this case, what do they do to therapists that, how do therapists study treating childhood trauma, particularly childhood sexual trauma? Yeah, good morning. If there is a patient that tries to recover, God forbid, the job of the therapist is to perpetuate trauma bond. So they know very well how to create trauma, and that's literally something that I, when I was attacked and I was told, I said, I know how to create trauma, I don't know how to heal that. They literally said that. And one of them even said, I know I cannot forget my trauma because some people are dissociated and some aren't. And this, Anya also talked about it, that there was one lady that wasn't dissociated. And then people began to, and then she spoke because it was, I don't know, high school or something. And then people began to laugh at Anya, and she thought she just looks like a Disney character. And she didn't know because she was dissociating, and she had to be a perpetrator. And so, um, so okay, and in the astral, it works in a way that they would torture to loss of sense of self, and nobody sees anything because it's the astral. So I was doing the thesis that talked about the body mind question and astral aspects of that. And so many traumas happen in the astral. So really nobody sees and nobody can tend to, which is why to begin with we look at the science of these things, because we try to recover. And we see that what happens, just recently in Israel there was a case in the news, a psychiatric nurse, male nurse, raped and kidnapped a patient, 17 years old patient, took her outside of the psych ward and buried her alive in a real estate construction site. Okay, then he would, then as per the code, as per the structure, he would have to wear a dress to show that he, okay, submitted, and then he would have an address. Then he would have a house. So, and the fact that they do forced genitalia mutilation, which is basically forced sex change, and then the person, I don't know, gets testosterone and they crosses a man, for example, and it's like, oh, you're gay. You gay? Oh, you're a trans. How did Anya say? Oh, you're trans. Also, you're a trans woman or trans. Okay, and one energy even showed me is like they do forced genitalia mutilation, and then they call people clone. And that's all done on consolidation of natural resources. And that the more, um, how should I say that, the official or the paperwork or the um, jurisdiction level agreements on these world consolidations are done as real estate. To the lawyers that that wanted to do apprenticeship in real estate and thought that they will be able to get away. Okay, because of the blood, I have. um, and this is okay. They have to murder to have another house. Murder to have another house. So it's murder per estate. If you'll say, who's they? Anybody that you call elite. It's a real estate cartel because the natural resources are. How do you make agree on, let's say, the Dead Sea? Okay, all the minerals. Well, if somebody buys the Dead Sea, I can't buy the Dead Sea. UNESCO and UNESCO. Well, it's not going to look pretty. Okay, as a country like Jordan and Israel or Palestine, then they get a 100-year contract to use the land, and then they need a special contract to drain the resources. Okay, the right to mine the resources. The housing is just like they can be swiped with the wind. The housing affect we the people, but also the elite. So for the elite themselves to get housing, they need to torture a child or do what that psych ward nurse did, and then they wear a dress, but they are also raped in many occasions, or if not all occasions. And then they wear a dress to show that they have submitted, and they have a dress, which means that they are the conquered feminine. Um, and I know that from people that try to traffic me in academia. And so that, of course, affect also food and nutrition. Because what do we grow on the soil? Food. If the essential superfood is being called weeds and being sprayed, then whatever we will eat, even if it will be luxury food, and by the way, this food shows up in luxury plates, okay, whether it's purslane or the amaranth and so on. Um, but whatever we will eat will not be nourishing enough. And even on the elite plates, it's not showing up. And with all the torture that they go through and put through, it doesn't absorb that well. Okay, the nutrients don't absorb that well. Sovereignty, sovereignty. So sexual boundary violation is both harming in terms of causing disease, and to both the offenders and the victims or survivors. Um, and that sexual sovereignty violation is also a violation of sovereignty. So one cannot expect to have sovereignty if there's no sexual sovereignty, and there's no sexual sovereignty without honoring the yes, no, and maybe. And here is the thing that because of the, by the way, the job of my psychologist back there was to create disorganized attachment pattern, and so to traffic or, and here I see it as traffic, but Traffic is like everything there is trafficking. Traffic is like being a first lady, and traffic is like being like, there's something that they wanted to do there with the skills of the person, because otherwise they would not be interested. Um, Very sad through that to find out. Um, so this is, and this is, and everyone there has to do those weird things. Okay. This is why tending to, and by the way, that happened to me when I tended to, the reason I went to therapy was to have a safe attachment pattern. I already studied when I was in academia about with psychology and so on. And I want my quest was to have a safe relational pattern, because I saw that that affects not just relationships, but also business and the ability to have a career. And this is why they try to have people have this organized attachment pattern, um, and that's how they use that as some sort of a Machiavellian power structure to take over or to have a curtail, or and because they want people to be addicted to trauma bonds, then people will all of their life would look like that. And this is how they get people to murder because an authority figure says so, whether they're men or women. Um, and and that's affecting literally everything from owning the media, which is what Anya is Anneke, and there's Anya. Anya talks about, um, to global, really global. Okay, um, and regardless of how we name the spiritual, it's not spiritual. It's the inversion of spiritual. Okay, but the fact that it's inversion of spiritual doesn't mean that what people call Jesus is upright, because the Opday and the Mormon Church are as vile, and the Jesuits. Okay, so um, and there are, and a lot of that is, we have said in a story coming from Inuit for a reason, because these inversions of occult practices are as old as the Inuit. Um, and they do harm food and housing, and we see the element of femicide, but the feminine is also a feminization ritual of humiliation. A lot of it is, in the kink community, a lot of it is masqueraded as kink, and while kink is supposed to be safe and consensual. um, okay, there's in Israel there was the academia, which which was brought to some sort of and the Gurian, which is Orthodox Jews. It's a cult that imbues orthodoxy with trafficking and abolition of women rights. Um, that's what it means to be a Gurian. So okay, and they claim consent, but I don't see it. Um, and they try to make people religious forcibly. They try to do that to me several times, which is beyond funny. Especially when I do astrology. And although it does move, and yeah, so those are the things that are arising to the surface. And I'm going to continue watching Anna's interview with heretics on YouTube. It's this interview. Um, Andrew Gold, heretics. Okay. And if people want to criticize me about the fact that he has a lot of viewers and is he or isn't he, I don't know. Okay. So I'm not, it's just like I'm watching this interview um, and Anneke Lucas has been speaking for literally decades. So a lot of people are asking how come she's alive and so on and so forth. Well, there is an economicity to murder, okay, and I want to stress that as well. Um, there is an economicity to murder because, by the way, I saw this video showing up about love spells. Again, anything that is love spells that is violating sovereignty um, has an undermining effect, and they do use that a lot in the occult. A lot. Okay. I remember when I did Jupiter Point of Tellus and Rockefeller Astrolink, I talked about the social engineering around that. Um, but yes, they do that a lot. They love to separate couples. They love to create couples and then create scandals. Um, okay, and they love part of the things that they love is to do, what they did to Melania, forcing her to talk about someone as if she was climbing up the ladder through the pants or something like that. And then it would have an onset because now Uranus is going through the Venus of Melania Trump, and she's wanting out from. It might not even be from Trump himself, but from the entire setting. Um, okay, and that is, and that's important because the real estate could not be made without address, which would entail all these things to do with child trafficking, particularly child trafficking, because to have a house is one thing, but to begin with, they wouldn't, if they didn't want more from the supposed trained slave that, as they see it, um, okay, and it puts everybody into very weird conditioning um, around this topic. Um, and this is why the extensive, there's a reason why signing a document when under pressure is not valid. Um, so those things are all important to take into account because every single thing they play at, every single thing they play at the certain, and because they want to bring the people to be, or to even bring the people to play in a certain way that would be in their benefit. Okay, for example, if people don't pay tax, yeah, they don't pay tax to the government, and then supposedly those resources can be funneled, but then they're trafficked and they don't have a place to stay, and they have this inability to work, and not to pay tax is not suffice. We actually have to have a support system that is the equivalent to housing first, independent of ability to work. Is it then to be able to recover? Okay, to be grounded enough to not be subjected to mind control. That's the thing. Um, okay, so well, definitely the taxes are funneled to classified projects, talking about where the taxes are funneled and talking about the fact that classified projects is um, basically all these trafficking codes, and that money belongs to we the people as housing independent of ability to work, as soil without, like, they don't really have to work this hard. A lot of people can build a cabin in the woods or gather as communities, but those communities themselves would have to provide for the people to be able to have housing independent of their ability to work. And their ability to work is also whether it's to raise children, whether it's to cook for themselves. And sometimes having the housing and the conditions that are sovereign allow people to cook for themselves, allows people to have the energy. When the food is actually nourishing and people actually get to sleep without being sexually assaulted in the meantime. Um, and so, because what would happen to people that need the government benefits, it would be way easier to recruit these people to do crime. Okay, one torture session to dissociation, gone is the person. When people like me or like Annika Lucas or like Anya are talking, that's the neck that we're risking. So those things definitely need to be taken into account because we see in the United States, we see globally that public housing is basically non-existent for decades. Even in Netherlands, when my mother did everything okay, she went already when I was 12 to try to live in Netherlands so that we will be able to apply. And the realtor, Dutch realtor, expected her to traffic me, which she said no. And they expected her to traffic me for housing. Okay, that's basically what he wanted. And when I got 16, then they had my father's approval and they had my passport. Um, then we would travel again. And they say, because in the beginning they say wait until you're 16, and then they say, well, you must live in Netherlands, because the places were so occupied by human trafficking, the housing prices were such that they were not allowing us to stay in Netherlands in order to receive the public housing that I am entitled to and to begin a process to retrieve the nationality of my mom, which she had to give up upon divorcing my dad. Not even, no, when she was married to my dad, not upon divorcing. She had to give that nationality because she had to pick between nationalities as a married woman. And and she found it difficult to give up her origin nationality, which was Israeli. And this is why she didn't have a Dutch passport herself, but I did as a daughter of a Dutch person. And I talked about the effect of ritual abuse on sperm count, okay, which is important to discuss because there are a lot of cases where the children are by marriage. And by the way, in Netherlands, there are two types of marriages. One type is where people are married but don't acknowledge the children. My parents were married in a marriage where they do acknowledge the children, and of course that's stronger than sperm count because there is satanic abuse going in both Israel and Netherlands, which affects sperm count. Okay, and that affected the lineage. Also, my uncle, they have two dogs. They don't have a daughter. Then perhaps with technology, um, then my father has another daughter that's now a teenager. So, but for my parents, it was important to have natural birth. And they check the wife, they check the wife, they check the wife until they check one time the husband. And that was the story. This is important because it's also showing what the long-term effect of ritual abuse are. Um, and I know effectively that my father went through violence when he was a teenager, and then he was aggressive or something like that. So, okay, a child doesn't grow aggressive over nothing. So, um, basically, it would mean that my parents were both post-traumatic, and that affected their marriage and their divorce. Um, and my and me, of course. Um, and the reason that I talk about that is to show how important it is to tend to the topic of nervous system supporting housing and land, whether it's gardening or just the weeds that grow on the land or rewilding, even in terms of, let's say a person has a house and garden, if the garden just grows its weeds, it's not because it's neglected, but because this is where the actual food and medicine, the best food and medicine is coming from. And whatever we grow extra on it is the it's not even supplements because supplements have become in, interchangeable with food. But whatever we grow extra would need the nourishment of the soil and of these weeds to have enough nutrients in the soil to grow, let's say, tomatoes or other type of food. Amaranth is also chicken food. Okay, so amaranth is naturally growing, and for people that nourish themselves, let's say by eggs, then that can be um, a free way to raise chicken. And again, because I never had purely access to land where I can rewild and grow the actual things unsprayed, then I don't know if I can be vegan or not. And I don't know even, okay, maybe like, I'm the last person to say that people can be vegan when they cannot. But I also don't want to discount that because growing cattle is quite arduous, and I don't know if that's so effective because it's, it's the best food for sovereignty is food that grows sovereignly. Okay, and that is doesn't mean we can't grow tomatoes or we can't. It just means that before somebody hunts an animal, make sure we have the amaranths and the purslane and the invasive supposed weeds that are the best medicine before we go to the actual flesh and blood that, by the way, was considered by Judaism as joy. And I don't necessarily see it as such. Okay, when I eat a salad, I eat living vegetables. so so that's more joyous. I don't know what it does to the vegetables, but that's more joyous. Um, and again, I'm not against eating meat, but definitely the way we grow cattle and and why is that so? Because to grow cattle, one needs to have real estate. Address. Underneath the dress, they had to bury children, and this is how LGBTQ to begin with became associated with the P. And at the same time, I want to take into account that there can be, we don't know if there are gay or straight people because we never had zero rape society before. Okay? We can't make assumptions that there are only two genders or not because we really never had sexual sovereign society before. And to have that, we also need to allow for these sexually sovereign um, gender non-conforming thing to arise, but we can't add the P there because the P means children, and children need to be honored for their non-erotic self. Okay, when I explained that, a lot of people that went through basically ritual abuse, because I remember the first time that I said the most I will remember is like the pedophilia, and or if you have any of the family and so on, and I was like, what what was I hearing? Okay. And for those of you that know me, it was while I was standing to true crime and to assassination, political assassination, and other things, and that is just magnificent. So a lot of people that heard me saying that, or some people that heard me saying that, began to think that I'm a pedo because why do I even explain? No, I'm survivor of these dumb fuckery. Particularly, what I remember is the second frontier, and yes, there was the first frontier attempt. Okay, whether it's kidnapping and use of practitioners against me and so on, as happens to so many people. Um, and I'm taking the privilege that I have that I did get to academia, and I'm a researcher basically. I'm not working in academia right now, but I'm taking that privilege to be the voice for the voiceless, because a lot of these people didn't have an academic degree. Okay, outside of Israel, I had an academic degree because I was basically agreeing to accept certain medical tagging that was superficial, both because it was uncomfortable for me to even begin to talk about trauma, to be very honest, and because that allowed for funding for a degree, and I couldn't get along with the working sector because of all of the corruption there. And then I agreed to receive certain tagging, and I cannot say that is the wrong tagging. It's just that there wasn't ability to talk about trafficking rings, and I didn't even know that this is connected with that. And because of that, I got funding for a degree, and I still had to do volunteering, which was fantastic. But this is also where I learned that the so-called weakened neighborhoods were strong neighborhoods that got weakened when they began to develop, when they began to be too strong. Okay, when they began to be just too sovereign for the municipality, not the current municipality, but the previous one, which is years ago, decades ago, actually. And then they trimmed the volunteers because they didn't want us to spend more than 5 years there, supposedly under the guise of giving people more chance to volunteer. But they basically didn't want us to know too much because they were going to completely depopulate those areas and turn them into trafficking 15-minute cities. A city is not profitable business. A city is only a non-for-profit business unless it is a death and concentration camp with human trafficking, and there where the profit is. This is why address, okay, when I saw when Annika, I'm sorry, when Anya showed the picture of Bill Clinton in the dress, and I was like, oh, that reminds me of something. So for my case, it was supposed to be, I guess, my trafficking, but I didn't do anything to children. I didn't do anything to pets. I did like there was no meat. um, in fact, when my kittens went missing, I knew that there could be ritual sacrifice around that, and I didn't know which neighbors I could ask so that if they are alive, that they wouldn't be sacrificed. Until today, there are cats that I didn't that I don't go on looking for because I don't know if those that if they will if they are alive, then my looking for them might harm them. And I tended to that in the second season of Water Expands Upon Cooling, which is tending to the missing people, which is beyond scary for me because I was effectively missing during COVID. Okay, and then all of my support systems that would could assist with anything like housing were cut off, um, basically so that I won't speak. But that only caused me to speak because I understood that that pertains to that and I tended to that because otherwise I really didn't know what's going on or why. And and as far as I'm concerned, I did literally everything possible to, whether it's learn about financial freedom, how does money work. In fact, the more I did, whether it's about safe attachment pattern or it's about financial freedom, the more I did to take responsibility and to learn and to be educated and so on and so forth, the more dumb fuckery was exposed. And and we see that the people that are okay in those lineages, there is a desire. And I want to address that. My surname is Youngblood. I learned that all of them live in this Harlem region in in Amsterdam. The family was from North Amsterdam. Okay, there was affiliated with the church, and then my uncle was fired from the church, and then he begins to talk about Lucifer or something. It was as an antithetical, like he had reasons to get mad when he was fired from the church. Okay, and he became a taxi driver, mind you. And I'm not gonna elaborate on that if you don't know that. Okay. And so um, I don't know what the grandfather did. The grandmom, both of them passed, so the grandmom was affiliated with church. And the other lineage is Saban, which donated to a hospital and is affiliated also with, but they're also Orthodox. So they're like, and I mean, and I'm in no contact with hardly anyone. I was in contact with my uncle and my father. Um, And my father, I'm really grateful for him, was sharing my posts when I was in Netherlands, and he really said, it was like even a tent in the woods. Um, but of course, it wouldn't be burden on a family that I didn't, that's like if I would come to visit, I would come to visit bringing something, not asking for something, and it's like normal etiquette. But this is also where I'm not in contact with I grew up with my mom. Okay. That's basically even my mom's family. Like, there was one time somebody tried to connect with me, and I was like, okay. And then there were the COVID shots, and I was like, when I was even vaccinated, I was like, then I don't know, it dissolved away. And I was like, okay. And I know that there is a family of the families, basically my mother's aunt, that worked in the university in Tel Aviv.